All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Jessica Bunting, Research Practice Director and Webinar Host at CPWR. And with that, I'd like to formally introduce our panelists for today. Each of them represent one of the three primary organizations partnering on the Falls campaign and Stand Down, although we, of course, rely on many other partners to make things happen, especially the NORA Construction Sector Council Falls Work Group. They're very instrumental. So we'll hear first today from Dr. Scott Ernest, Associate Director for Construction in the Office of Construction Safety and Health at the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, NIOSH, followed by Scott Ketchum, Director of the Directorate of Construction at OSHA, and then Chris Cain, our Executive Director at CPWR, the Center for Construction Research and Training. So with that, Dr. Ernest, I'll pass it to you to get us started. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jess. Welcome, everybody. It's great to be here. Thanks for joining us today, and we're looking forward to talking about fall prevention. Also, I just want to say thank you to everyone for all the work you do each and every day to protect construction workers. The Falls campaign began in 2012 with construction stakeholders seeking ways to raise awareness about falls. Falls from heights are the leading cause of fatalities in construction, with many occurring among small residential construction contractors. The stand down takes its cue from the military, where operations stop or stand down when a critical safety problem has been identified. The National Safety Stand Down is a voluntary event where employers stop work and meet with employees to discuss safety. The campaign was initially developed as part of the NORA Construction Sector Council. The campaign leaders are NIOSH, OSHA, and CPWR, and it's based on evidence of what is most effective. We continue to evaluate the campaign and look for ways to enhance its impact on construction safety and health. The campaign and stand down is a nationwide event to reduce the number of deaths and injuries from falls in construction. So why focus on falls? Well, again, falls are the leading cause of deaths in construction and unfortunately have been for many years. In 2019, there were 401 fatal falls out of 1,102 total fatalities in construction, and many of those deaths were preventable. By helping to raise awareness about the hazards of falls from roofs, ladders, and scaffolds, the campaign and the stand down are national efforts focused on reducing deaths from construction falls. Just want to say a few words about the Construction Focus 4 as defined by OSHA. In 2019, the Focus 4 represented 709 deaths, or 64% of all construction fatalities that year. Fatal falls to a lower level climbed to 401 deaths, accounting for more than a third of construction fatalities that year, 25% increase over 2018. And if you look at the other three hazards, caught in between, or caught in and in between, electrocutions, and struck by, they're significant, but they're not to the level or to the number of what falls is. So again, they're all important, but we're really focusing on falls today. The NIOSH homepage and the resource directory points to the campaign website and the stand down. It also has links to many different resources and tools related to falls and fall prevention. There's also links to the OSHA website, the CPWR website, and I wanted to say CPWR maintains the main campaign website for the overall event. Now I wanted to talk about looking at falls on a year-round basis. The stand down is 1 week a year, but saving lives is a year-round priority. And here are some reasons to consider expanding your event beyond just the 1 week in May. First, job sites change and crews come and go, but you may have new workers who miss the stand down. Workers have various levels of experience and training, and periodically updating safety training can and will help save lives. It's human nature to become complacent or overconfident about safety. Scheduling periodic events can re-energize everyone and help to focus on fall prevention. And then lastly, implementing an ongoing fall prevention program is one way to show management commitment, improve supervisory leadership, involve workers in safety, and conduct training. CPWR, OSHA, and NIOSH have many resources to use when deciding what activities will work on your job site for fall prevention program. Be imaginative and select activities that will fit your company's culture. Consider things such as doing multiple stand downs. Do another and just change up the activities or specific topics that you focus on. Focus on rescue. Is there a plan for rescue? If someone does fall on your work site, update your fall prevention plan. Pause work and inspect your equipment. This should occur before work every day, and provide fall prevention training. I also wanted to mention that we are expanding the number of languages that our fall prevention products are available in. We've got many different products now that are available in both English and Spanish, but we're also looking at other languages such as Haitian Creole, Portuguese, Vietnamese, and others. We're always looking for new products to add. So let us know if you have products that apply here. The $1 trillion infrastructure bill is likely to reshape the U.S. economy and make a very significant investment in critical infrastructure. The plan includes spending on aging roads and bridges, transit projects, and rebuilding schools and hospitals. It will also invest in electric vehicles, replacing lead pipes, and overhauling the nation's water system. But the plan goes beyond infrastructure to build the nation's clean energy workforce and expand manufacturing. But the bottom line with all this, with all that spending, is it needs to be done safely. We want to really focus on safety and prevent falls while that work is going on. The next few slides are information from the NIOSH Fatality Investigation Program. I've got two examples of some fatalities that occurred through falls in construction. The first one occurred in 2017. It was a 52-year-old drywall company supervisor who was setting up mobile scaffolding in the living room of a new home when he stepped onto an unsecured plank in order to hang a piece of drywall. The metal walk plank that he was standing on flipped on its side, throwing the victim to the subflooring 11 feet below. When EMS arrived, the victim was pronounced dead at the scene, injuries to his head and to his neck. Now this slide shows some of the images of where the actual accident occurred. The victim and a coworker were hanging drywall in the living room for 3 days. They were approximately 50% complete when the incident occurred. The company was not facing a deadline and the job was on schedule. Before installing scaffolding guardrails, the victim stepped onto the unsecured plank to hang the drywall. His coworker said there were no guardrails because there was insufficient clearance up to the ceiling. The metal walk plank flipped on its side, throwing the victim to his death 11 feet below. Again, when EMS arrived, they could not resuscitate. In terms of the report that was written after the fact by the investigators, there were a number of recommendations, but the bottom line is fatalities are often the result of many contributing factors in a sequence of events. The investigator identified the following contributing factors in this incident: the fall exposure itself, the misuse of the walking platform, and a lack of fall protection. Recommendations from the investigators including jobs being designed to minimize falls exposures, making sure that employees are using the proper equipment for work. Employers should ensure that scaffolds are fully planked and decked. And also, workers on scaffolds should always use fall protection, including guardrails or personal fall arrest systems. The second face investigation was another residential roofing fatality. In this case, it was a 37-year-old Hispanic laborer who worked for 1 day, removing and replacing shingles and cleaning up debris. He was wearing a hard hat and a personal fall arrest system that included a full body harness, a lanyard, a rope grab, a roofing anchor, and a 50-foot lifeline. The incident occurred on a 1.5-story home with a complex gable roof that's shown in the lower right-hand corner. The laborer was working on the garage that measured 23 feet to the peak of the roof and 13.5 feet to the eaves. This shows some more images from the actual accident. It's believed that the laborer lost his footing, slipped and slid down the roof, falling more than 13.5 feet to the concrete driveway below. During the investigation, they found that the anchor for the laborer's personal fall arrest system had pulled from the peak of the roof. The investigation showed that the anchor was installed laterally along the ridge of the roof and only had 2 or 3 nails of unknown size holding it in place. The rope grab was attached to the webbing of the harness, and the energy-absorbing lanyard was attached to the roof anchor. The harness, the lanyard, the rope grab, and connectors appeared to be in good condition, but there were damaged fibers on the 25-foot mark on the 50-foot lifeline. Contributing factors to this accident included the lack of training, an inadequate safety program, and improper assembly of the fall protection system that was being used. I wanted to just talk briefly about some of the resources that are available on the NIOSH website. First are a number of short videos about falls and fall prevention. This slide shows 3 of them. There's really a large number of them that are available, and they get into all different aspects of fall prevention and how to go about conducting an effective stand down. I also wanted to touch on some of the newer infographics that have been developed related to falls and fall prevention. NIOSH and CPWR work collaboratively along with our falls work group on our sector council to develop products in both English and Spanish. And this year we developed several. On the left-hand side, we wanted to bring to light the impact of extreme heat on falls. Construction workers account for about 1 in 3 heat-related deaths, and also we provided a snapshot on the impact of falls for construction workers. And that snapshot is on the right-hand side, showing 1,102 construction deaths, 401 fatal falls in 2019. Again, these products are available as PDFs and JPEG, and there's a whole series of infographics that are available from not only this year, but going back since the beginning of the campaign. Another product we put out was an infographic related to mass climbing work platforms and safety on mass climbing work platforms. This is based on a project in our Division of Safety Research. If you're not familiar with mass climbers, it's construction elevating equipment that's used to perform work at heights. Mass climbers are equipped with a power drive unit for propelling the work platform up and down on a vertical mass structure. And this infographic gets into not only the hazard of falls from working on mass climbing work platforms, but also musculoskeletal disorders. A lot of the work that goes on is masonry, a lot of heavy lifting, and there's some design changes that can be done to reduce the risk of MSDs. And then lastly, I just wanted to point out that the NIOSH construction website has many resources. On the left-hand side, there's links to information on COVID-19, information on opioids and suicides, and really, all major construction issues when it's to safety and health. In the center column, there's a spotlight on new communication products such as respiratory protection, COVID-19. It also addresses CPWR's small study program. And then finally, over on the right is another infographic that we had released in the last quarter related to the opioid epidemic and its impact on construction workers. So with that concludes my update. I'll go ahead and turn things over to Scott Ketchum, Director of the OSHA Directorate of Construction. Scott?
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with everyone today. I'm Scott Ketchum, the Director of Construction within the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. And I want to start off, as Scott did, and thank you for all you do to protect workers every day. By being here today, you're showing interest in how you can improve the workforce's posture when it relates to fall prevention in the workplace. So I want to thank you for that. And it's good to be here to discuss something that is near and dear to my heart. Being as I've been with OSHA for approximately 25 years now, I've had quite a few experiences, unfortunately, with fatalities related to falls. And this is a subject that, quite frankly, as I said, near and dear to me. And for many of you, if you don't know, if you go to our webpage and you look at I believe it was the 2017 or 2018 fall stand down, I gave my personal experience from a fall that resulted in myself getting injured when I was a younger man. And it's terrible. The consequences are terrible for families. So we take this very seriously, and we're looking to do whatever way we can to emphasize the importance of preventing falls in the workplace. And so with that, without any further ado, why are we doing this? Why are we having the fall campaign? First of all, as was demonstrated earlier, in the 2020 BLS data, there were 1,008 construction fatalities, and falls to a lower level accounted for 351 of those fatalities. And 645 of the 4,700 fatalities in all industries. So it's not just the construction industry, but it is a higher percentile when you look at the construction industry than general industry or maritime. We know that incidents related to falls are preventable, and what better way to prevent that than to have a full year-long campaign on falls with our great partners, CPWR, NIOSH, and NORA, and augment that with a stand down. I'm going to talk a little bit about the BLS data today with you. And I'm also going to talk about our results from the 2020 stand down or 2021 stand down, and moving on to ways that we can improve the campaign as well as the stand down for the next year, for this year. Next, our stand down for this year, if you did not know, is May 2nd through 6th this year. And it will be, the stand down is conducted worldwide. I think I've told y'all in the past that the Air Force conducts this worldwide. We have partners within the ASSP and other organizations, unions and trades that all do this worldwide. And it's really a good time to sit down and focus on falls in the workplace, the ways that we can prevent and survive them, highlight the safety hazards on the job that employees face daily, and discuss the safety policies that hopefully prevent people from falling on the job. It's all about protecting the company's most valuable asset and stakeholder groups' most valuable asset. That's you, people. And that's what this is about. Okay, a little bit about the fatal fall incidents in construction. This is from the BLS 2020 data. You can see a breakdown here. There were 368 total falls in the construction industry. And what I mean is, I mentioned earlier falls from one level to another, but it also did not take into account slips and trips. So this number, 368, accounts for the slips and trips in the workplace that resulted in a fatality. And you can see that roofing contractors were on the top of this list with 80 fatalities, or 21.7, 22% of the fatalities. Finishing contractors, residential building, painting and wall covering. These are all the different types of construction activities that employees were conducting at the time of their fall. And so this is the latest data. I just wanted to share that with you, and we'll get into a little bit more detail in a moment on this. So across all industries, you can see the top line. That's all industries: general industry, construction, maritime, and agriculture. And you can see that the number of fatalities is way too high. We need to do everything we can as safety professionals, as a regulatory agency, as stakeholders, all of us together. And that's what we're trying to achieve here with our partners and with you as well. CPWR, NIOSH, NORA, and it includes you as well. And so we're just trying to get across that these total fatalities are significant. Any fatality is significant. But if you look at across all industries, there were 805 in 2020. That's 805 too many. I think we would all agree that's 805 families that are missing a family member. And in construction, there were 368 total falls, including slips, trips in addition. And then falls to a lower level, which I spoke about earlier, there were 351. Now you can look at these numbers. I'm not going to read them out to you, but you can see how they've gone up and down. Fortunately, we're seeing a downward trend in 2020, and in 2021, I hope we see even more of a trend. Over the years, we'll do analysis on that to try to determine where our successes are. I'm not claiming success, not until we get down to minimizing that number as much as we can. That's our goal. We'd like to see zero, all of us. So I just wanted to point out those numbers of the total falls. It is, as Dr. Ernest spoke to earlier, it is significant. And I would say on the construction focus 4, I'll reiterate that a little bit more. Between these 4 hazards, falls to a lower level, struck by objects, electrocutions, and caught in between, account for 51% of all fatalities in the construction industry. And you can see almost 35% of those are related to falls. So that's why we're here today, to re-emphasize, to put the emphasis on trying to do all we can together to prevent falls in the workplace. It's extremely important, and we are definitely at OSHA, and our partners in NIOSH and CPWR are certainly focused on doing what we can to work with industry and reduce these numbers. It's important also to bring up the infrastructure bill that was recently passed by our Congress. Over the next period of 8 years, there will be $800 billion to $1 trillion that are directly related to construction. And so there is going to be enormous amounts of work going on to work on roads, bridges, power facilities, upgrades to that. And you can just imagine the types of activities that will fall into the focus 4, which is falls struck by electrocutions and caught in between. So we are focused on that moving forward, particularly, definitely with an emphasis on falls. As we move forward with the construction infrastructure bill, you will see new products that are being developed by OSHA specifically oriented towards those focus 4 hazards, with falls being a major portion of that as well. As we move forward with more emphasis on these infrastructure activities, we're going to have more people working out there in the construction industry, and we want to make sure that that we do all we can to get ahead of the risk and marginalize it as much as possible. Now, on the OIS data, this is the OSHA information system. This is what OSHA has done in the last year regarding inspections. Our fiscal calendar year starts in October and goes through September 30th. So just so you understand that. And this is actually from the OSHA database of OSHA inspections that we've conducted. And you can see the highlighted areas on there with the highlighted as red all have a fall component to it. And so OSHA is certainly focused on addressing fall hazards in the workplace. And, I just wanted to point out that if you look at it, it is the #1 condition that OSHA does find in the workplaces in the construction industry trades. And we certainly are focused on it. It's also the #1 willful violation for lack of fall protection, and it has been that way for quite some time. We're trying to move the needle on this. We're trying to do all we can in our enforcement and in our outreach. We're using all tools within our toolbox to try to get the number of fatalities down. And this is the enforcement side on it. You can see where those areas are that OSHA is putting some pressure on the enforcement side. The top fall related conditions for construction obviously are on 1926-501, which is fall protection. You can see again that there was quite a bit of a difference in that on the willful violations and the repeat violations, but also on ladders, scaffolding, and fall protection training, as well as aerial lifts. All these areas, as taken out of the charts previously, show that we are focused on falls, and many of these conditions that or violations of these standards that are on here are related to falls. Okay, so related to our outreach side and what we're doing on the stand down, I'm going to talk a little bit about where we are, where we were last year with the fall stand down, and things we can do that'll help improve us moving forward. I appreciate all the work that people are doing. I know in the last 2 years, we've done many things virtually, and I know many employers are doing stand downs in the with the workforce out on construction sites. So there's a mix of how the stand downs are being communicated, but I'm very happy to say that we've been able to reach quite a bit of people virtually, and we're also looking to get back out in addition to physical interactions with workers in the workplace, in the physical workplace as well, and utilizing both techniques. And granted, we all know that we've been focused on the pandemic and the pandemic's effects on our workforce. And so we're going to do all we can this year. But as I've said before, we're going to have to see where the conditions of this year's of COVID are at the time of this year's stand down to make some assessments on exactly how far we're going to move in regards to our participation physically out on sites. But it's been a tremendous success over the last 8 years. Millions of workers have been reached since 2014 when this was kicked off with our partners. And again, these are reported in all 50 states. I'm going to show you some data here in a few minutes about where these stand downs are occurring, and internationally as well. I didn't focus on the international side, but only on the state side. But small, large stakeholder groups, some as individual as groups of 3 or single individuals participating in a stand down. So we've held them from all sizes, and we're tracking the certificates to see how we can improve the program over the year, from year to year. And so that is important. If there's one thing that I leave you with today about the stand down successes, it's your success. It's not OSHA's success, it's your success. We're very happy to have people participate in the stand down. We're hopeful that you'll give us anecdotal information that will help us make it even better, or so that we can make suggestions to others. So if you apply for a certificate, give us your feedback. We use that to improve our communication and our outreach as part of the campaign. So please, please do that. On my last note on there also, I just wanted to point out also that the non-construction companies have also shown a major interest in this as well. It's primarily construction workers, but we do get a good mix of other stakeholder groups interested in this as well. The total workers reached over 2019 through 21 are there. You can see we reach, this is just in the United States, we reach, between 400 to 450,000 workers each year. We've had other years where we've reached up to 600,000. Anecdotally, I will say that these are certificates. We know that there's many more who do not apply for a certificate. So again, I'm going to reiterate, if you do not apply for a certificate, it doesn't help us assess how the participation rate is going, and it gives us information that we can make it better. So please apply for a certificate if you're participating in a stand down. Do that every year, please. Thank you. Workers reached by type of construction. You can see that 162,000 or 36% were in commercial construction. 34% was in other construction. You can see that 16% weren't in construction. This is the breakdown of the certificates that we got in 2021. And so just wanted to show you who is participating, at least from what we see from certificates that we receive. The stand down size, you can see 1,000 plus workers was 2%, and the vast majority of these are ranging between 1 to 100. And so it's pretty cool that we get a good mix across the board, and we're happy with that. Again, just reiterating that the number of recipients of certificates in your comments helps us judge how we're doing in each one of these sectors and where we can make improvements for the next year. The top mentioned topics that have come up in stand downs that we've received from comments ranged from, obviously, the comments that we received. Fall protection is obviously the highest rated. We have ladders, inspections of fall protection equipment or inspections of the work site, harnesses, scaffolds, lifts, I'm assuming aerial lifts and scissor lifts and other maybe MUP related equipment. And then rescue and slips were all covered as topics. So there's a broad range in there, but obviously fall protection is one of the highest mentioned of all the topics that comes up as relative to the stand down that stand downs that employees and associations hold. Now, breaking it down in the United States. So each one of the states, we broke this down into how OSHA operates within 10 regions, region 1 being out of Boston, region 2 out of New York, region 3, Philadelphia, 4, Atlanta, 5, Chicago, 6, Dallas, 7, Kansas City, 8, Denver, 9 out of San Francisco, and 10 out of Seattle. And you can see the range of participation rates amongst them. Regions 4, 6, and 9 accounted for the majority or the largest majority of the fall stand down events that were conducted within the states in that regional area. And you can see those regions are broken down by colors, so you can see which states were in those regions. We have a further breakdown on this if you're interested by state, but we figured this would probably be the best way to articulate. Then there's areas that we can explore for opportunities in the future, and we're looking at ways to increase the numbers across all of those regions from our OSHA counterparts out in the field. Again, somebody asked in one of the questions in the very beginning that was sent to us before this webinar on, are there any stories about lives saved? Well, here's one right here. And this in this particular case, this happened during the fall stand down last year when we were doing the fall stand down that week. It happened, it was very prescient. If it didn't happen that week, it was the week prior, where 3 workers were rescued while working on a scaffold in downtown Cincinnati. And if they weren't wearing fall protection, this would be 3 deaths. That they were 8 to 9 stories up above the ground, and they were all retrieved and rescued within 17 minutes or right thereabouts. And that's something that we can focus on this year as well, which is rescue times. We know that that is important to the survivability of an employee who is suspended up on after a fall. And so that definitely is something that that we can definitely focus on in your fall stand down this year about rescue and means of getting employees rescued. Now, I know Chris Cain is going to discuss this in a moment too from surveys that she's taken. So you're going to hear more on rescue and the times. So I just want to say that falls are preventable. I think we all know that. We all have a role. It's not a manager's role to prevent falls. It's everyone's role. Everyone has a role to make sure that we're doing things safely and be a good steward of your fellow worker. It's not just during the stand down. It's not just that one day or 1 week that we do the stand down. It's every time you put on fall protection, or anytime you're relying on a guardrail, or anytime you're trying to prevent someone from falling or getting injured or killed on the job. It's all of our combined efforts that save lives. It may only take a few minutes to do a quick job, but it only takes a split second to fall and lose your life. I know it happened to me when I was a younger man. Before I came on to OSHA, it happened to me, and I can tell you from my own experience, it happens quickly and it's terrible. It's not worth it. Think, plan, and practice fall protection. Let's go home safe at the end of the day, alive, safe, and well. How can we prevent falls? You know, you're going to hear this from the campaign over and over again. Plan, provide, and train. That should be our mantra moving forward about how we move the needle on the amounts of falls in the workplace. Plan ahead, provide the right equipment, and train employees, train anyone wearing fall protection or on fall protection practices in the workplace. The more education we do on this, the better off we'll be. I also wanted to say that we have compliance assistance specialists across all of OSHA, and these groups of compliance assistance specialists are out there to help you. So if you do not know who is in your local area office that's a compliance assistance specialist, call your area office. You can go to our webpage, osha.gov, and look up the area office, and you will have a number on there that you can call, and you can identify who your local CAS is. So if you want some assistance from a compliance assistance specialist, we can get that to you, but we need to know you need the help. And the CAS assets are out there to help you. They're also available to work on workshops, speaking events, things that are providing education and training out to the workforce on things that OSHA is doing and the OSHA requirements and how to protect workers. And so I can't say enough about that or about our cooperative programs, including DPP, the Strategic Partnership Program, and our Alliance Program that aid us all together. As I mentioned, we use all of our tools together: compliance, assistance, enforcement, and regulatory, to ensure that we cover all aspects of safety and health. And so please look at all those different aspects that OSHA can provide. And CASs don't come with a cost. This is free assistance, as well as, if you're a smaller employer, on-site OSHA consultation service. If you haven't done that, I would advise you, if you're a smaller employer, and to go onto our webpage for OSHA consultation service and get a consultation visit. Every year, we award consultation programs money to work on certain strategic issues, and falls is definitely one of them. So if you're interested in getting consultation services in your state, go to our webpage, osha.gov, and type in consultation. That will get you to where you need to go for that. And what they do is, it's free. They work with employers to identify the hazards, provide advice for compliance for OSHA standards, and assist in establishing and improving safety and health programs, which is the key to prevention of many different matters within the safety and health hazards that are out there. Safety and health programs. So I wanted to end this with giving you some resources of ours and our partners. I mentioned consultation. There's the consultation website, web location. Compliance assistance is also on there, and our Stop Falls webpage, as well as CPWR Stop Construction Falls. Excellent resources. Please utilize any of these. You saw the infographics that Scott Ernest provided earlier from NIOSH. If you go to the Stop Falls campaign on the NIOSH page, there's plenty of infographics that will help you do a fall stand down this year and lead it to success. So what I would end this on is, I am looking forward to another successful year and hopefully doing all we can together to curb the fatal falls in the workplace, and to educate employees and the workers, all workers, to prevent these falls. And hopefully we can move the needle on this. And I thank you very much. And I turn this over to Chris Cain now.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it. Don't go anywhere because we've got some questions for you coming up. But before we do that, I want to follow up these great presentations with some new research findings that emphasize the importance of year-round fall prevention programs that address fall safety from all different angles, from making sure pre-bid and pre-job plans are thorough and site-specific, to providing the right fall protection and access equipment to make sure all workers are appropriately trained for the tasks at hand, including regular refresher training. So what we did, well, if you were in our kickoff webinar last year, you might have remembered that I talked about we were fielding a fall experience survey. Thanks, Tyler. So we did, and we were trying to find information on the perceived and the actual underlying causes of falls from heights. Today, I'd like to share some highlights from our findings on that survey. The survey was developed and fielded to improve our collective understanding of underlying causes and to accomplish a number of goals, including improving our approach to the National Falls Campaign and the resources we develop in support of it. CPWR relied on support from our partners for this project very heavily, including the ANSI Z359 National Work at Heights Task Force, the NORA Construction Sector Council Falls Work Group, and many other Falls Campaign partners. The next slide shows some information about the distribution. So we put it out between February 12th and May 15th of last year and received over 670 total responses, including 13 in Spanish. In order to analyze the survey results, we relied on a team of 2 to code and quantify the qualitative data and analyzed everything using Qualtrics and SAS. Of the 671 total respondents, 495 indicated that they had previously been involved in, witnessed, or investigated a fall. We did not ask respondents to specify which category they fell in. Out of those 495 that had experienced a fall in some way, almost 64% were in construction, followed by a little less than 10% in general industry. We have several questions to help determine the severity of the fall, the primary one being whether or not it was fatal. More than a quarter of the falls were, while the rest were non-fatal. Among all reported falls, 64% required assistance from emergency services, and almost 80% of those who fell required medical care. As you would expect, falls from over 20 feet, indicated on this chart on the 3 right-hand sets of bars, were most likely to be fatal, collectively accounting for more than a third of all falls, but 2/3 of the fatal falls. Looking at the final set of bars on the right, you can see that those who fell from over 40 feet made up 32% of all the fatal falls. Looking at the numbers in a different way, of the falls that occurred above 40 feet, 65% were fatal. It's important to note, however, that more than 5% of fatal falls happened at less than 6 feet, highlighting the fact that even shorter falls can lead to serious and even fatal injuries. When applicable, the most common method of rescue is self-rescue, followed by professional and emergency services. Other methods specified included equipment such as aerial lifts, bucket trucks, and stair towers. Now, this slide's a lot to look at, but if you look at the most common rescue methods for each category, those are highlighted in light blue. When a rescue occurred, professional emergency services and self-rescue were most common, except above 40 feet, where rescue by others on the crew was often necessary. In a series of questions about the use of fall protection, nearly half of respondents indicated that the individual who fell was not using any. When fall protection was used, personal fall arrest systems were the top choice. Breaking the information down by fatal versus non-fatal falls in the table on the right, we found that the reported fatal falls, 59%, were using some sort of fall protection, but the remaining 41% were not. In the non-fatal falls, however, those who fell were nearly split on the use of fall protection, with 54% using none. When asked whether an individual who fell believed fall protection to be required by the employer, only 45% said yes, 39% said no, and another 16% were not sure. Looking into whether requiring fall protection led to the use of fall protection, we found an important relationship between the two. When fall protection was thought to be required, it was used properly 79% of the time. And when individuals did not think it was required, it was used properly only 22% of the time. When asked directly about the primary causes of the fall, based on opinion or investigative results, the #1 response selected was insufficient or ineffective planning. Following that was fall protection being provided but not used, and improper use of fall protection. Lack of relevant training was also highlighted as a major cause. When asked about the level of planning prior to the fall incident, only 21% indicated that no planning was done, although others were unsure. Still, respondents indicated that for the majority of incidents, some level of planning was done. But we know from the earlier question about underlying causes of fall that whatever planning was done was often insufficient. The most often selected type of planning conducted was pre-job planning, followed by review of a job site hazard analysis or job site safety analysis before the work began. It was much less likely for the employer or competent person to have engaged in pre-bid planning or any type of rescue planning. For example, when reporting on fatal falls, only about 13% of respondents indicated that rescue planning had been done. One area that we did not ask about that could be investigated further was the quality of the planning. For example, did they consider specific hazards, circumstances, and crews for each job site, or did they copy and paste plans from the last job? Overall, the majority of those who fell did have at least one type of training, with about 31% of respondents indicating that there was no training or they weren't sure, and 69% selecting at least one type. Looking across the board at different training types, there are a few types of training that seem to help prevent fatalities. For example, looking at the importance of self-rescue training, especially considering the earlier finding that self-rescue was a primary method of rescue used, only 5% of those who died had had any training in that area. It also appears that not having any training is correlated to the severity of the fall, with 18% of those who died having zero training compared to less than 12% of those who survived. In looking at other factors that may have contributed in one way or another to the fall, we asked respondents whether the individual who fell was new to the workforce, which did not seem to be a significant factor. However, when we asked about whether the individual was working for a general or a subcontractor at the time of the fall, the results suggest that those working for a sub were at greater risk, particularly for fatal falls. While 44% of those who experienced a non-fatal fall were working for a subcontractor, 64% of those who died were employed by a subcontractor at the time. While we had a very small sample size of falls involving individuals who do not speak English as their native language, you can see that based on those that we did hear about, language does not seem to be a confounding factor as to whether the fall is fatal or not. Native Spanish speakers accounted for only about 17.5% of all falls, but 25% of fatal falls. Other non-native English speakers make up less than 4% of all falls, but over 6% of fatal falls. Conversely, native English speakers accounted for 79% of all falls, but only 69% of fatal falls. Continuing down the list, when it comes to practices involving new workers, we asked how often respondents saw proper supervision by a competent person, and only 41% said always or frequently. A full 56% said occasionally or never. Responses about how often new workers were properly trained before being exposed to fall hazards was slightly more encouraging, with 53% saying always or frequently, but 44% still said it was occasional or never. When it comes to personal protective equipment, responses showed that while it is often provided by employers, improvements are needed when it comes to fit and active enforcement of fall protection requirements, which, as we said earlier, is a big indicator of whether PPE is properly used. Based on these and other findings from the survey, I want to just take a few minutes to highlight the planning and training resources available on Stop Construction Falls website. So an easy way to access our planning and training resources is through the small contractor section in the Plan, Provide, Train, but you must understand this is not only for small contractors. The section is also entirely available in Spanish. I'll share some of the other resources that you can find, but I wanted to focus primarily on the planning tab of this section. This page gives you a list of planning questions to consider, and then at the bottom you'll find several links. One link is a short, streamlined written fall protection plan meant specifically for smaller contractors who may not have the time and resources to devote to something more in-depth. However, for those who are interested in creating more detailed plans, we also have a much longer option that provides a glossary of definitions and links for additional information throughout. The detailed plan includes a subsection on rescue to ensure that there is a plan in place beyond just calling 911 and that workers are trained properly. Finally, we also have a daily checklist in that section that can be downloaded and used on site to check for hazards and also track training of employees. Another planning resource we have is a list of activities for ongoing fall prevention program that keeps safety front and center for both leadership and workers. On the site, you'll also find various resources that can be used for training workers, including all of these things: toolbox talks, hazard alerts, infographics, videos, face reports, and other real life stories, other handouts, hard hat stickers, research findings, and resources from our data center, which I'm going to review on the next slide. CPWR's data center is very prolific. And if you're familiar with our Stop Construction Falls website or our data center web pages on cpwr.com, you might already know about our fatality mapping project, which tracks fatalities across the country using pins on maps that can be clicked on for more information. The whole project was recently given a facelift and updated with new data, and is now one of the data center's interactive dashboards, and allows you to manipulate the data in numerous ways to look at fall fatalities across states and across time periods. In addition, the data center puts out about 6 data bulletins each year, several of which contain information about fatal and non-fatal fall trends in construction. Finally, as we approach the May 2022 stand down, I want to remind everyone that we maintain that one-stop stand down shop with easy access to everything you need to hold a stand down. We include resources from all 3 of our organizations here and add to the collection regularly as new resources are developed leading up to each year's stand down. So that's the last slide, and if you proceed to the question slide, I want to thank everyone for their attention, and we do have time for questions. Jessica mentioned in the beginning, we did receive a long list of questions during the registration process, so we will be primarily focused on getting through as many of those as possible right now. But be known that any question you pose, put in the chat in the Q&A, we keep track of, and they'll help us inform future webinars. So with that, I'm going to launch into the questions. But actually, before I do, I just want to acknowledge Jess, because this study, this survey that was done in partnership with the ANSI committee is really her child, and she's been responsible for this analysis and prepared the slides for me. So great job, Jessica. We've learned a lot from that fall experience survey. So with that, I'm going to go into the questions. I think I'm going to throw it at Dr. Ernest to start. Here's a question, why is so much time and money spent on personal protective equipment when we know it's the least effective way to do safety?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Great question. I think the bottom line is that we know that PPE is effective when it's used properly. It's readily available and it's effective. Governing principle when it comes to addressing falls and safety hazards in general in construction is the hierarchy of controls. And again, if you're able to design out the hazard, that is at the top of the hierarchy of control, so that's more effective. But it's a lot more involved too. I mean, you don't just show up on a site on that day or in a few days and design out a hazard necessarily. A lot of times that involves getting the architects of a building, just a lot more effort to design something out. So the bottom line is we have clear evidence that PPE is effective when it's worn properly and used, and that's why there's so much emphasis on it for fall prevention.
Thanks, Scott. The next one I'm going to throw at Mr. Ketchum, the other Scott. Who's responsible for fall protection, like on a live edge on a multi-employer contractor job site?
Actually, I'm going to have Tim, my deputy, who's online with us. He's prepped for that question. Tim?
All right. So the question, who is responsible for fall protection on the live edge? I'm going to read into that question a little bit as if it's directed at OSHA and restate it as who can be cited for fall protection on multi-contractor job sites. So for that question, we go back to our long-standing policy under the multi-employer citation policy, where more than one employer may be cited for the hazardous conditions if if it violates an OSHA standard. So any employer that exposes one of its employees to the hazard created by an unsafe condition may be subject to the OSHA citation. But in situations where an employer's own employees are not exposed to the hazard, that employer may still be subject to the OSHA coverage. If the employer qualifies as either a creating contractor, a correcting contractor, or the controlling employer. Now, it's under this particular directive, OSHA uses a two-step process to help determine when more than one employer is cited for that hazardous condition. Now, in general, this multi-employer training is probably another hour in itself. But what I'm going to ask Jess to do is put the link to that directive that is on our website. I'll send her that link to make sure that people have access to it. But the first step in that process is determine whether the employer is a creating contractor, an exposing, correcting, or controlling employer. Once the compliance officer has made that determination of what role it is, that's where we go into what citation is appropriate. So if the employer falls into one of those four categories and there is a violation of the standard and there is an employee exposed, that employer can be issued a citation. So I guess to answer that question directly, Chris, it's very fact specific and it will be analyzed by the COSHO on the site. But pretty much if you're controlling, correcting, exposing, or creating contractor, you can be issued a citation. I'll go with that.
Thanks, Tim. Scott, Ernest, I wonder if you can answer this question. I'm not certain, but the question is, what proportion of falls involve slipping or tripping immediately before falling? And what are the most common reasons why these slips or trips occur?
Sure. Thanks, Chris. Another great question. There's been work that's been done on this. I don't have the exact, percentages, but, I would venture to guess it's somewhere around 2/3 of all falls involve, slipping or tripping prior to the actual fall. There was a paper that was done by Dr. Hongwei Xiao and NIOSH in our Division of Safety Research. It was published in 2014, and he talks about this a little bit. And again, in the vast majority of the cases of falls, there was a slip or a trip that started the whole process, which resulted in a fall from elevation.
Great, thank you very much, Scott. And I'm going to throw this one back over to OSHA. If fall protection for man lifts and scissor lifts will be covered, can you clarify the fall protection for scissor lifts? There are some confused about OSHA standards for scissor lifts and that a body harness or lanyard is not required for them due to the rails.
Okay, and I do have a staff member that is prepped to answer that question as well. Damien or Aaron?
Okay, Scott, this is Damien, and I'll take that one on. I think this question sometimes is generated by the misconception that scissor lifts and aerial lifts are treated the same in the standards, in which they are not. OSHA classifies scissor lifts as a type of a mobile scaffold, elevated work platform, which means it's covered under 452 for mobile scaffolds and the general scaffold requirements in 451. So what we've also done and what we've provided to Jess is links to letters of interpretations that will be posted by Jess in the stack that speaks to if a scissor lift is properly equipped with guardrails like it's supposed to be, then that is the fall protection that's required because it's treated as a mobile scaffold.
Great. Thanks, Damon. I asked the panelists if you can look at the chat because there is one question that we'd like to get to if there's time, and it's probably an OSHA question. But I'm going to go back to the issue of suspension trauma. And this is for Dr. Ernest. The question is about, we know that when there's lack of fall protection, that's a real issue, but what do we hear about any reports or stories about quick actions taken by coworkers in preventing suspension trauma, or first responders who come to the rescue? Are there any stories that you've heard of that?
Well, another good question, Chris. First thing I would say that, and when we were going through our presentations, we talked about some infographics, and there's actually an infographic related to rescue and suspension trauma on the CPWR website that was developed a number of years ago that provides some good information about how important this topic is. The other thing I wanted to say is that I do agree that there could certainly be more emphasis on this, and I think there probably should be. So I think it's a great question, great point. But NIOSH has done research in this area as well. Dr. Nina Turner, again, from our Division of Safety Research, published a number of studies looking at this issue back in, I believe it was 2008. So there's a number of studies that are available online that were conducted at NIOSH to look at this, and it's definitely a very important issue. And more emphasis should be put on it.
Great. Thanks, Scott. This one I'm going to throw at OSHA. The question is fall protection required at excavation leading edges? And I don't know if you can speak kind of about fall protection around excavations in general.
Yeah, I'll take this one. I know I had a staff set up for this, but subpart P specifically talks about fall protection when you're walking on a catwalk or a walking working surface over a trench. And the fall protection provision there is guardrails. As long as the side of the excavation is visible, and which it should be because the standard also requires that, there is no requirement for fall protection at the edge that the standard requires under subpart P. However, if you walk over an excavation, there is a requirement to have guardrails to protect you from falling into the excavation itself.
All right. Thanks, Scott.
I would say one last thing on that. Some state plans may have different rules on that, so check with your state plans because, for example, I know in Washington State, they have a requirement there that is different than the federal standard.
All right, thanks. The next question was on the fatality map, and I did cover this in the presentation, but not sure if Jess or Tyler can pop a link into the chat for where we're keeping the fatality maps these days. We've put it on CPWR in the data dashboard series that we have, and it's new, it's updated, and you can download the data and play with it or just use it in training classes. And we would love it if people would use it, and then tell us how you're using it too.
Chris, one clarification, if I could.
Sure.
Back to the excavation. If I wasn't clear, if you cannot see the edge of the excavation, prevention fall protection is required if you cannot see it. So I just want to make that requirement clear. If it's visible, the edge, then it is not.
Thank you, Scott. And then this one's for Dr. Ernest, is what can be done to pressure owners, developers to incorporate roof fall protection systems in the building design?
Thanks, Chris. That's definitely an important issue. We're currently working with Arizona State University on prevention through design. We've been funding them to do a series of workshops over a 5-year period. So they've had 2 of those now and moving into the third. The bottom line is, it really comes down to, the owners making decisions early on in the process to, invest in safety in terms of how the building is designed. Certainly there's more work that needs to be done in this area. There's a lot of other countries that are ahead of us because, quite frankly, a lot of times it's in their regulations or in their standards. I will say that the ANSI A10 committee does have a technical report on prevention through design for the construction industry, and there are some standards in the U.S., but it's not a requirement like it is in some other countries. So that's
I think that's a great answer. And for those who are interested in getting the A10 standards or technical reports, they're available through ASSP, who's the standards, can't remember what they're called, but they run the ANSI A10 committee as well as several other ANSI committees. And just speaking of that, looking at some of these questions, they're really specific to the Z359.2 committee, as well as some of the new classifications on self-retracting lifelines. And I'm not going to ask those questions, but really put a pin in those because we've had some great webinars in the past with members of that committee serving as kind of ask the expert. And I think we'd like to consider doing that this year. There's a lot of really technical questions that that can be answered by experts who are engaged in that committee, and we really like to get them back and do some good questions and answers. I think, Dr. Ernest, you thought that you might be able to answer this one. There was a question about rope grabs and moving away from rope grabs. How safe is a rope grab compared to other forms of protection?
Yeah, I mean, that's just kind of a quick and dirty answer. I mean, based upon my experience, what I know about it, I think they're perfectly fine. I'm not aware of any problems with rope grabs. So I think they're safe, just like the other equipment that's being used for fall prevention protection.
All right, thank you. I'm going to go to the chat. There was one question that came in, and I hope OSHA is prepared to answer it, but there's a difference between federal OSHA and California OSHA as it relates to fall protection trigger heights. And I don't know if there's any information that OSHA can share about, is there any activity around working with California to align the trigger heights, or if there's anything you can describe as it relates to that issue?
Sure, I appreciate the question. What I would say is that OSHA has had a continuing dialogue with our state plan partners in the state of California regarding the trigger heights for fall protection. It's ongoing, the dialogue. And so at this point, I would say that our regional administrator, our regional office in Region 9 has been coordinating quite a bit of that. I don't have any real facts right here on hand, but I would say there has been and there is an open dialogue that's been ongoing with the state of California over the trigger heights for fall protection.
Great, thank you. There's one question that came in on the chat, and Jessica, I'm not sure if I'm putting you on the spot, but the question is, does CPWR have a JSA geared to rooftop fall protection similar to the noise exposure form and the silica form? There was a recent publication put out from staff on JSAs used in the industry. Do you know if we have samples like that on fall protection on stopconstructionfalls.com?
I don't think so. There may be one or two. I'll check, and if I find a link, I will drop it in the chat. And I'm not sure in Bobik's recent work and his team's recent work in looking at JSAs, if they came across any that are relevant that I will check.
The publication that was mentioned was focused on electrical hazards. So one question I'm flagging for you, Dr. Ernest, is how do I get the senior leadership and ownership of my company to understand the importance of proper training in person from a competent person for everything, not just fall protection? They provide short videos only upon hire.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's an issue. That can be an issue in a lot of different companies. It's extremely important because, you know, management leadership of companies, you know, sort of set the tone. It gets into issues of safety leadership, safety culture, safety climate. I know, Chris, you guys have developed some great materials on those topics that really could be beneficial. So if you're interested in the materials, are available on CPWR's website. But it really, as far as I'm concerned, it just really gets down to the bottom line of, you know, good safety management, good management of your workers and your workforce, and just taking care of people. So I would recommend, though, if you haven't looked at those materials or used them, they're excellent. Again, CPWR's products on safety leadership, safety culture, and safety climate.
Yeah, we thanks for that plug, Scott. We are launching live the latest version iteration of what started out as worksheets in safety culture and safety climate, and now it's an online safety information management system that's out there ready for use for small contractors. I'd like to see if we can grab a link to our new safety, our online safety information. Linda, I wish you could speak. I know you're here, but better describe the new system that this research project has launched. We're super excited about it, and we're going to be starting to promote it. It's totally free, like everything we do.
Chris,
But
can I add something on that?
go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just thinking, as Scott was talking about that, if you haven't looked at our Safe and Sound program within OSHA, it's related centrically around the safety and health management system. And it has great tools on how to improve safety and health through a management system, and gives good examples of how to convince your management of ways that you can improve safety and health and the bottom line. And it's really important that messaging is done when you're communicating an answer to that question, that you relate it to employee safety and health, and also how it affects, you know, other things that happen within the organization. And it's important how you message that safety and health message to your leadership. And there's some help there on that page as well to help you.
Thanks, Scott. You know, one of the questions that came in through the Q&A is, why are we not using engineering first and going to a guardrail first? And I just have to agree with that. I don't really have a great answer, but you know, if you do apply the hierarchy of controls to the hazard of falls, guardrails would be a preferred solution than a personal fall arrest system, because the engineering control takes a lot of the potential, you know, error out of stopping people from falling. And while some folks do consider it infeasible for construction, we're just going to be up there for a couple of days. We've, you know, learned more and more out of innovations from the industry that have quick guardrail systems that can go up and be taken down, and they're very safe very quickly. And just want to put a plug in for we have a website accessible through CPWR called Construction Solutions. And there's lots of different products in there that are of the engineering control type, particularly for the hazard of falls. And I would encourage that hierarchy of control to be applied at all times. One thing is the OSHA regulations don't require it. So it's either or in the fall protection regs, and that's what, you know, we have to live with in the industry. This one I'm going to throw at Dr. Ernest. Can you spend a moment on proper sequence of loading a roof job and getting fall protection established?
Sure, glad to do that. Really, from my perspective, it really comes down to sort of proper planning of the job. You know, Chris mentioned previously sort of job hazard analysis, but in terms of planning for your project, you want to identify the fall hazards that workers are going to encounter. during the job. You're going to identify the tasks that they're going to be conducting and how that will relate to those fall hazards. Look at how the workers will reach the work site. Are they going to be going up ladders? Are they going to be using stairs, lifts? Think about the tools and the materials and how they're going to be used and how you're going to prevent tools from being dropped on people that are down below on the job. And then establish procedures for inspecting and maintaining and storing all the equipment that you use for fall protection. Making sure that all the workers are using the appropriate fall protection based upon the jobs that they're doing, identifying the anchor points. We've talked about prevention through design before. Hopefully there's anchor points that are designed in, but if not, they have to be installed, and where they're going to be located. Looking at the methods of setting the anchors and securing lifelines. One of those face reports was, one of the problems was the anchor was not properly installed at the apex of the roof. Other things to consider are identifying areas where workers could be exposed to falling objects. And, we talked earlier about the whole issue of suspension trauma. If there is a fall, how are we going to handle emergency response? Who's going to make the call? What are the numbers? And then also what equipment is available quickly to help get workers down if they are suspended after a fall. So there's a whole series of things, a whole planning process to think about and planning the job and trying to make sure it's being done safely.
Thanks, Scott. One of the questions that's come in is about, the fact that there is fluctuations in the level of work over time, and is that taken into account when we talk about fatalities? Because we often focus on the numbers, right? And when we looked at the 2020 data, which is the most recently available data, we saw what looked like a small decrease in the total number of fatalities, but an increase in falls from 2019. But when you really look at it, you look at rates, and the rates for the total fatalities in construction between 2019 and 2020 are pretty similar. They went from 9.55 per 100,000 FTE to 9.97, which is still too high. In construction, we're higher than most industries. These are calculations by CPWR's data center. But when we actually broke it down between Hispanic workers and non-Hispanic workers, because while we follow the trends in employment over the course of the pandemic, we did see different fluctuations. We saw some older workers leaving the job for good and younger workers coming in, but we also saw an influx of Hispanic workers in 2020. And actually the rate of Hispanic worker fatalities jumped between 2019 and 2020, while the rate of non-Hispanic construction worker fatalities actually decreased. So that doesn't answer the question, but it does raise the point that, we look at numbers, but we also have to kind of look at rates and the big picture and what's happening in construction and the changing demographics of the workforce, so that we can continue to focus and think how we can best reach the parts of the construction industry that need information and hopefully to affect change. So that was the question I wanted to answer. I'm getting close to the end, gentlemen. We do have another 9 minutes left, but let me just, there's a lot of different comments and whatnot coming in. However, I don't see a lot of new questions. Jess, did you see any that you think we need to wrap up with?
The one that came in that I thought might just be helpful is, does federal OSHA require fall protection rescue plan in construction?
That's a great question. I don't know, Scott, if you or one of your team can answer that off the cuff.
Carol, are you there? Or Damon?
I am here, and the answer is going to be partially it depends. Most of the time, yes. So it's going to depend on what kind of fall protection you're talking about. Oh, sorry. And it's also going to depend on what type of construction you're talking about as to the level of rescue requirement mandated by that particular standard. So that's why I say it also depends. It doesn't necessarily, it's not going to necessarily be required for what Chris was talking about earlier. If you have something protected by guardrails, what's the rescue requirement? And that would also be considered fall protection. So that's where it depends on the standard would come from.
Great, thank you, Erin.
Thank you,
So there was one other comment in there that I don't want to dwell on, but someone asked, when will mental wellness, suicide, and substance use prevention, I'll paraphrase that, come in to the forefront as an OSHA 5th or 6th focus? And I think if Tim Irving had anything to do with it, Tim is Scott's deputy at the Directorate of Construction, it would be there. And OSHA has amplified this issue and is trying to share resources to improve these kind of epidemics we have in our industry on suicide and fatal substance overdose. So I think that since this question came up, maybe in the follow-up email, we can send some links out to the resources from CPWR and OSHA and anything else we think is appropriate in the follow-up email. But with that, I did want to wrap up and thank you, Scott Ernest, and thank you, Scott Ketchum, and your team for helping answer these questions, and particularly thank you, Jessica. She is our staff leader for the Falls campaign, and she's doing a phenomenal job. And I appreciate all of you participating. Do you have any, Scott, would you like to make any closing remarks? Or
I'll just close by saying, couldn't ask for better partners with the CPWR and NIOSH on this. Thank you very much for all the preparation for this. And I'd like to thank everybody for attending this. And we're here to help, and we want to help. Thank you. Thanks, Chris.
thanks. Scott?
Yeah, I just want to agree with what Scott Ketchum said. Absolutely. Thank you to the OSHA team, the CPWR team, as well as everybody who called in and participated and all that you're doing every day for construction worker safety and health. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Scott, and everybody, stay tuned. We're going to be continuing to beat this drum as we lead up to the stand down, and we will have a lot more events and activities to share. So have a wonderful afternoon, everybody.